In today's episode, I'm joined by a mother who shares her experience of losing her adult daughter. First through years of separation and struggle, and then through her heartbreaking loss in 2019. This is a powerful conversation about motherhood, advocacy, and the lasting impact of a daughter who deserved so much more. Welcome to this episode of A Gift for Grief. Today, I'm joined in the studio by my lovely friend Marianne Griffiths. In this deeply moving and important conversation, Marianne shares the story of her daughter Abby, a young woman who spent much of her life fighting to be understood, supported and believed. From an early age, Abby faced learning difficulties, mental health challenges and repeated trauma. Her family spent years navigating her education, chasing social services and the mental health system in search of the right care. Along the way, there were moments of hope, heartbreak and resilience. Today, Marianne speaks openly about grieving Abby twice. First, when she was taken into care, and later when she tragically died in 2019, just as she was due to return to the community. This is a conversation about love, loss, advocacy, and the importance of listening to vulnerable voices before it's too late. So, thank you for joining me today, Marianne. We're both so nervous, aren't we?
I'm very nervous, actually.
Well, I'm nervous because I know your story. We've known each other for a few years now, and we've talked about this podcast for a while, and now it's here. I'm quite jittery about it. And
I'm more than jittery.
But we're going to be fine. It's just going to be a conversation between two mums. So we'll forget all about the microphones and the recording. And
Yeah.
I can't remember how we first met, but you think it's you.
Well, how we first met, I believe, was that I was recommended by a friend. Well, you was recommended to me by a friend for, massage and things like that.
Yeah.
And
Well, I do remember you coming, and then we soon connected because you shared, that you'd lost your daughter Abby, and I'd lost Matthew, and we both realised we were part of this club that nobody wants to be part of. And I think there's an instant connection when you meet other people that have gone through a massive loss. I think we were destined to meet up eventually.
Absolutely.
But before we talk about Abby, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you do?
Right, well, I'm 70 years young.
No.
I am so. My mother was a single parent, so I didn't know my father, so she brought me up single-handed. I left school at 15, told I wasn't going to amount to anything. How wrong they were, because I knew from a very early age I wanted to be a nurse. So I went at 17, did my nursing entrance test, failed it, but still had that determination. The matron saw something in me. So 1973, I started my nurse training. And yes, I'm still nursing 52 years on, although I retired December 2019 after Abby died. I still continue to work and I still enjoy the job I do. So to the teachers that thought I would not amount to anything,
that's incredible, isn't it? Yes. And you worked in the A&E for a long time.
Yeah, I worked in A&E for 33 years. And I retired December 29 after 46 years. So I'd done lots of things, intensive care, everywhere I've done.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot of trauma, a lot of illness, a lot of death.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah. Now, your amazing son, Ashley, has been a guest on my podcast, and he bravely shared his experience of losing his sister, Abby. Yeah. And if any listeners would like to hear that episode, it's episode 10, and it's called The Space Between Us.
Yeah.
I'd like you to share your story about Abby and what happened, but only share as much as you feel comfortable.
Okay. Well, I've got 3 children, 3 grown-up children, Ashley, Zara, and of course Abby. Abby, the youngest, she was born in 1987. I just sort of let her develop in her own way, really, because she was the youngest. My mother was a great part of the other two's life, but sadly she died when Abby was 14 months old. So Abby didn't really have the, grandparents' involvement because John's parents had died. Well, John's mum had died as well. So I just let her develop in her own way. Abby had certainly got a mind of her own. She was totally different to the other two. She, just different. She went to play school. Abby was well known at play school and different things. But when she started school, it was sad really, because the primary school, schools let her down big time. She started school, they were open plan classrooms, and Abby decided that she quite liked wandering around and she wanted to be with a teacher that she preferred rather than her own teacher. But it was clear that she'd got some learning difficulties, and it was first highlighted that it was difficulty in reading. So we said, we was asked to encourage her, which we did, and that's it. But by the second year of Abby's primary school, Abby's behaviour started to deteriorate, and the teacher she had got then, just classed her as a naughty child. So Abby became a naughty child, really. We kept on going into schools and said, what can we do? How can we help her? They'd got like special educational needs person there that sort of gave us some support. However, Abby wasn't listened to, and nor was we. And so I decided to take on education and try and get her statemented. So the primary school was not interested at all. However, the middle school actually welcomed us, trying to get the statement, and we managed to get a statement for the middle school. And the middle school was better because they did try and help her, and they tried to support her learning need. All she wanted was to be part of a group, to be friends with people. Going to get emotional now.
That's so hard to hear, isn't it? And when children are labelled naughty children, that sticks with them, and that's so unfair, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So we did take on education, and basically the woman there, she was not really very helpful, but we pushed and we managed to get an educational psychologist to assess Abby. And it was clear when she was being assessed in the first year of middle school, I was allowed to be in the room as well. And the teacher set her a task, set the classroom a task, like, say, after the 6 weeks holiday, write what you've done down in a 6 weeks holiday. I knew exactly what Abby was going to write on that paper. Nothing really. There would have been, she'd filled the lines in. There'd be letters, there'd be this, but there would be nothing to say, I've done this in the holiday. It was the squiggles. So she was being assessed and watched by the educational psychologist. And anyway, just to cut a long story short, really, the report came out that the educational psychologist actually said Abby's behaviour was due to the difficulty in her learning, and she needed the support with her learning. So we'd got the evidence there that she needed support. We did sort of get her statemented, so that was from the educational side. But however, her behaviour had started to deteriorate a lot more, and she was being seen by we got the child psychologist to see her and different things, and they were talking about autism and things like that. But nobody would actually give her a diagnosis.
Right.
And so this is going back, nearly, 40 years, 30-odd years. How old Abby? No, 30-odd years. And so nobody would give her a diagnosis. So, of course, then, she'd got a problem, but nobody would address it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we did get a statement. So we had a statement for her, and the middle school adhered to it. However, things then went bad from worse because they recommended the senior school, which was not a school of our choice. And Abby had 2 years in the senior school. They didn't support her learning needs. Again, she was let down. And again, her behaviour got bad, because her behaviour, what she'd do is she would try and express herself. Nobody would hear. So she would either shout, hit out, or whatever. So Abby used to get excluded. She also, at the senior school, got sexually assaulted by someone.
Okay.
And again...
How old was she then, Marianne?
She was about 14.
Okay.
But again, because of her behaviour and different things, nobody really listened to her. And by this time, we'd actually already started getting like different agencies involved, like social services, because Abby would run away. She started to self-harm.
It's so difficult to hear this, because 30, 40 years ago, children like Abby they weren't recognised, were they? I mean, I'm hoping that schools now are much more clued up with autism and learning difficulties. But back then, they weren't, were they?
They were, but they were supposed to be, because they were actually told, about this, but they just, I don't know what it was about schools. It's just, I know with the primary school, I don't know, they just didn't seem to want special educational needs children in that school, whereas the middle school welcomed them. And then the senior school didn't. But I say by different agencies then we'd started getting down. And of course Abby, she couldn't really express herself, because she'd got, and also then she'd started at the age of 14 with epilepsy.
Right.
So she'd had this sexual assault, and then she had a fit and different things. And so she had that to contend with. So she'd got a muddled brain.
Yeah.
And she just couldn't express herself. So we tried everywhere. We tried everything. Even, I've got to say the police were absolutely amazing, because we did get involved with the police, because Abby had run away, and she'd kind of get involved with people that, saw, she thought were friends, but they weren't friends. So she got in with the wrong peer group.
Yeah.
And they would just set her up and,
So for years you struggled to get Abby the support she needed. Yeah. How does... And now I suppose you're haunted by what you've been through, because you felt that you were unheard, you were failed by the systems that were meant to help her.
Yeah.
And these are the sort of things that haunt you now, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's, we've I said, CAMS, everything, medical, we've got everything, and like, as I say, when she went to the senior school, she had this sexual assault. Police were going up, they were, but the school did not, they didn't. And even then, for a 14-year-old to actually have to go down to a rape suite and things like that, and have to be experienced kind of going through that again, and still not be heard. And at this first time that Abby was, because Abby had been in the rape suite twice, but the first time, I remember sitting in the room, and then there was 2 police officers outside laughing.
Why were they laughing?
Well, I don't know, but I did actually go out and I said, I don't really think. I said, I know you're waiting and all this lot, but I said, if you want to have a private joke, can you go somewhere else where I can't hear you?
Yeah.
And my daughter's in the next room being examined.
Yeah.
So it's just people's,
Honestly, I can't imagine what it would have been like to go through something like that. But how did this affect Abby's mental health and your family?
Well, Abby self-harmed then. So she started self-harm. So that's how we got involved with CAMS and things like that. But her behaviour just got worse, because she was just fighting to be heard.
Yeah.
And we as a family, when I look back, I think, did we actually go through it? But what we went through, how we are actually together now, I actually don't know.
Yeah.
Because, we just... And like Ashley and Zara, Ashley was sort of moved out. Zara had sort of moved out. But, they had all been part of that. and it's not right.
A lot of families would have just fallen to pieces, wouldn't they?
Oh, God, it was hell.
Yeah.
It was hell. And we were. And I mean, John and I mean, we fought and different things, and probably Abby saw things that, maybe she shouldn't have done. However, it's just hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it's
then
just
you're
a
fighting
constant
systems.
fight.
So you're trying to fight to keep a family together. Yeah.
So how old was Abby when she was taken into care?
18.
Okay. And what were the events that led up to that?
Well, I say because Abby's behaviour got worse over the years. She put herself in and out of care. We put her in care. So she's been in the care system. And she was well known within the criminal justice system because, I say, she got into vulnerable groups. So say, like, maybe there was an argument started, Abby would just go in and protect somebody. But, of course, everybody disappeared. So when the police arrived, I said, yeah, I did hit him. So, so she was very well known with the criminal justice system. So we were in and out different courts because of different things for different assaults and whatever. And it was only a matter of time. Even the barrister even said it's only a matter of time. He said he can't keep her out, So this will be hard.
Only share what you feel comfortable sharing, Marianne.
So 2007, as I say, Abby self-harmed. And September 2007, this is the first time I really grieved or going. September the 13th. So Ashley was going off to Thailand. He was going off for Thailand and he was going out for a drink with his dad. And so anyway, she was due in court the next day for one of these assault things. And she'd said to her dad, "Oh, make sure you're back." Anyway, Abby is kind of, black and white. You've got to be back at a certain time if you're not back at a certain time. Yeah, John wasn't back at a certain time. I'm not going to go into great detail, but it all kicked off. I called the police and I remember Abby walking out the door. So when police were called to our house, because of her self-harm, we didn't just get you used to get the van, because they didn't know what they were coming into because knives were involved or whatever. So she literally walked up the path with the police and the ambulance was there because we just had to go be checked out at the hospital. And she just looked at me and she says, "Mum," I says, "I can't help you anymore." I says, "It's out of my hands." And that was the first day that I'd lost Abby.
And that is a very difficult type of grief because they're still alive, but you feel that enormity of the loss. When you look back on that time now, do you feel you'll ever be able to make peace with that memory?
I suppose because we are where we are now, I'd say probably I am 90% at peace with it.
Yeah.
10% I'm not, because talking now, it's not going back there.
Yeah, yeah. It's still raw. I can feel it, I can see it, we can hear that.
And I don't think that'll ever go. But we've stuck together, we've got through this, and how I look at it, what we've been through, I've got a better understanding of people in situations like this.
But it's frustrating because you think if you had have received the right support at the right time, things would have turned out so differently.
I mean, there's so much more. I mean, she was let down so much.
Yeah.
Well, we all were.
Yeah.
We all were. Yeah.
So how long was she in care for then?
Well, she So that day that she went, so on September the 13th, then we had to go. She was sent on remand, pending to see whether she would be have a custodial or a hospital order. And so we had to go through with the courts. Prison was not the answer for her.
No.
However, you know, I know long-term in mental health hospitals isn't always the answer. You know, however, that was the better of the two things. So our solicitor at the time, he was going to be away for the actual Crown Court in the November. And I decided to write to the judge because I thought this is my last chance of trying to get heard and getting help for Abby. And we didn't know whether he'd listen to it, read it or what. And we went to court that day and I was greeted by our solicitor's colleague, and I'd been in contact with the child psychologist that had actually kind of helped support us along the way, and he had actually spoke to the mental health, and there was going to be a bed for Abby in a mental health hospital if the judge agreed a statement section. So I'd said it to this consultant. He says, well, I don't know nothing about this and all that. I said, but this is, I've had the message confirmed that if the judge agrees a hospital order, she can go today. Not back to prison, she can go today. Anyway, he poo-pooed it sort of thing. And I'm not disrespecting him or anything like that, but he was going with what he had got. So we're in the court, and if you've never been in a court, it's not the most pleasurable places to be. And Abby was brought into the sort of dock behind us. So there was John, myself, and an advocate. And I'd given the letter to one of the people who said he'd give it to the judge. And when the judge come in, I remember the advocate saying, she said, oh, I hope he's had his breakfast, because if he hasn't, it could go either way. She just made it as
what a ridiculous thing to
I know
say.
it is, but it was just, it was kind of, I have actually got a weird sense of humour, and sometimes that actually helped my sense of humour and things like that. She'd got to know me, so, and I said, well, I hope he has then. Anyway, he kind of did things and he questioned the barrister and whatever. And then he kind of just looked and he says, I take it you're the mother of Abigail Griffiths. And I couldn't even speak. I could not speak. And he says, are you able to talk to me? Or he says, or, you know. And he says, or would you like somebody to talk for you? So I just said, you know, this advocate. But anyway, he just looked. He says, you've sent me a letter, haven't you, Mrs. Griffiths? He says, I've read this letter. Oh, God. He said, I understand you've had a long battle and you've actually written to me as a last resort to see if I can help. He says, and I'd actually like to help. He says, so we actually spoke with the barrister and different things, and he says, I understand that if I agree a hospital order, Miss Griffiths can go to this hospital. And anyway, what happened was was a bit of a conversation, and basically the judge says, I think we need to recess for about 2 hours so that you can actually check that this is definitely in place, so I can then summarise my, report sort of thing. So we did recess for 2 hours, and he came back and he actually agreed a hospital order. Oh, and then the justice system is quite a bit of a laugh, really. So Abby's there in the dock, so he's agreeing this. He said, right, to the prison officers, he said, right, you can take her to the hospital. They said, we can't do that because now you've put her under a mental health section. We can't take her. They could bring her down from Peterborough to Warwick Crown Court, but they couldn't take her 15 minutes up the road to this hospital.
Why not?
Because she'd got a mental health section.
Right.
Initially, she was under remand for assault or whatever, whatever she was there for. And because now she'd got a section, they couldn't take her. And he said, in all my years, I've never heard the like. He says, she's secure. You could take her.
Yeah.
So then he tried his way. He said to the advocate, could you take her? But then legally she couldn't because she wasn't insured then to take, which is fair enough. So Abby then had to go back to Peterborough Prison, awaiting appropriate people, I presume a mental health nurse or a doctor, to go with her to transfer her to a hospital.
That's completely bonkers, isn't it?
It was. So the whole weekend, but this was a Friday, and when she phoned me when she was back at Peterborough, she said, "You'll never guess where I am, Mum." I says, "Oh, at Peterborough Prison." She says, "No." She got back. Because she was under the age of 21, she could stay under remand in Peterborough under the age of 21. But now she'd got a section, she had to be moved to another prison, so she was moved to Worcester. But she eventually got moved the week after the weekend to the mental health hospital in Birmingham, where she stayed for 5.5 years. Well, she was in mental health for 11.5 years prior to her dying.
And did you feel that was the right place for her?
It was the better of the two options.
Okay. So looking back, what do you wish professionals and authorities had understood about Abby and children like her?
They actually do need to listen to the parents.
Yeah.
And also the child, because one size does not fit all. And every child is individual. And the best people that know that child are the parents. It is difficult. I work in the medical profession. It is difficult, but they do need to listen.
Yeah.
More.
I mean, you know your child better than anybody else, don't you?
Well, you do.
So she was in the hospital for
11.5 years.
11.5 years. Are you happy to talk about what happened?
Yeah.
Share whatever you feel, Marianne.
So, say the November, she ended up going over to the hospital. She was put under a Section 37, Section 3. So she's detained under the Mental Health Act for as long as needed.
Did you see any improvements in her over that time?
Yes, they did their best. But then they realised they were failing her, that they weren't getting anywhere. And then there was another incident, like I briefly said earlier. They have tribunal meetings. And again, Abby had been put on various tablets because it's easier to control behaviours by medicating people, I believe. Mm. Well, I don't believe that really, but Yeah. And so to control Abby's violent outbursts or whatever, she was put on antipsychotics. And they kept on changing them, but she was put on this one that really, she was like the Walking Dead.
Yeah.
So she had to come into this tribunal meeting. The carer brought her in. And Abby's very outspoken, very kind of wants to be heard. Like I said, she was like the Walking Dead. She was drooling. She was kind of, what I'd say, the lights were on, but nobody was in. There's a lot of people in tribunal meetings. You've got a magistrate, you've got legal representatives, you've got the consultant, etc. So you all sit round the table, and you have to introduce yourself, etc. So Abby's sitting next to me, John's next to me, consultant's opposite me, and she's just literally there. The light's not on, nobody's in, drooling.
And you'd not seen Abby like this before?
The last few meetings we had, because we used to go and see a regular, and I wasn't happy with her presentation at all. And again, I'm very much, as a medical professional myself, I'm very much for working with the medical professions. However, what was happening was not right. And so they go around and ask people things, and of course the consultant's asked to give his, and I'm not dissing the consultant at all. He was very good in some ways, But I did challenge him on this one. And he basically said that, I think the magistrate said, how's Abby doing? Oh, yes, much better now. We've got her on this new medication. Well, I just flipped. I just totally flipped. And I said, better?
Probably better for them, but not better for Abby.
I said, better? I said, yeah, well, he did. I said, better for who? I said, this isn't living. I said, she's like the Walking Dead. And he actually said to me, he said, that's not very appropriate. I said, no, it is appropriate. I said, she's gone downhill the last few weeks. She's quieter. She's not responding. I said, mention her name, Abigail, and she'd actually tell you to go off on one, you know, more or less. Well, in no certain word. But I said, she's not responding to anything. I said, this isn't acceptable. And I said, I'm telling you here and now, you need to change that medication. I said, otherwise I will be taking this matter further. And he said, well, I'll look at her anticonvulsants because she was on anticonvulsants. I said, no, you won't. You're a neurologist. You're not a neurologist. You're a psychiatrist. I said, you change that antipsychotic. So anyway, after a long meeting, the magistrate realised that I was, you know, and I said, I will be backing this up in writing that I want this done.
Yeah.
I said, if not, I will be seeking elsewhere and taking legal advice. And in fairness to him, he was good, and he did. And within the 2 weeks, he had changed the medication, because I said within 2 weeks, I want to change.
And did you see a change in Abby then?
Not immediately, because the antipsychotic was still in her, so you had to wait. However, he did. So, you know, in fairness to him, he did listen, and, you know, we did. But then I think they realised then Abby was going to be too much for them. So we had to then go through the kind of, she was going to have to be moved to another mental health hospital. And again, it was put to me that it could be worse, it could be better. However, I am a great believer in hope. I have got a faith, and I think I did so much praying, and thankfully Abby was agreed to go to this hospital in Northampton. But she was eventually moved to a low secure 2 years prior to her dying. And again, she'd got a fantastic consultant who really listened, the social worker that we'd got, who I'm sort of briefly still in contact with. People, they actually listened and worked. And like I did mention that Abby had got like a perception, what she saw, problem that nobody addressed for years. We fought for years to get her assessed on that one. A year prior to her dying, they actually assessed her. And then she was diagnosed with what they called vestibular discrimination.
I've never heard of that. So what's
No. Well, vestibular discrimination, it's, I'd say, to put it briefly, it's like vertigo or, you know, things, but 1,000 times worse. Right. So what Abby perceived, what if she was stepping down a small curb, she wouldn't see that. She would see that as the Grand Canyon. That's what she would see. Her risk behaviour with crossing roads, I would say it's safe to go, and the car would probably be down the road. However, she would always suddenly run, but she'd run when the car was near her. She could not perceive or get that perception.
Is that something she would have been born with? Is that like
I would assume so.
Yeah.
But this was part of her learning, but nobody ever picked it up. But the year before Abby died, we finally was listened to again, and she was finally going to get heard for this other problem that was causing her disabilities.
Can you tell us about that bond that you and Abby had, especially in those last couple of years when you finally felt listened to?
So the last 2 years I'd got, well, prior to that, as I am a medical professional, I've got some mental health friends. And two of my friends actually said, they know Abby and different things, but they said, she'll come to a point where she'll have to think, well, I can't keep on either fighting this or whatever, but she'll work with people and she'll either adjust to her disabilities or whatever you want to call them. And she said they'll probably come around about the age of 30. Well, they were right. Because 2 years prior to Abby dying, as I say, she fought the system, she would fight people. But again, another changing point was was a Boxing Day, and this will be 2017. Zara was pregnant, so there was Zara and her husband Ian. My husband and myself went to visit Abby on the Boxing Day. I think that was another day I finally just blew and just lost it all again, whereas Abby was an absolute so-and-so on this meeting. She was calling everybody, she was whatever. She upset us all. And I'd actually turned round and she said, her language was very choice. And I said, you know what, Abby? I said, I'm done. And she just laughed. I said, no. And I'm not going to use my language, but yes, my language was quite strong back to her. I told her she could go and do one. And she says, I've heard this all before. I says, no, done. Zara was broken, Ian was broken, we were all broken, we all cried all the way home back from Northampton. I said to the member of staff before I left, I said, I don't want her contacting me. I says, I want nothing more to do with her. And that's hard.
Is that the first time you had actually got to that point?
Oh, I've been through that, but I said things like that before, I'm done or whatever. And But again, you kind of, and the amount of people said, oh, you should just... But anyway, I said, no, I'm done. And I don't know what, it was just like a light bulb had switched in me to say, no, she's got to stand on her own 2 feet now and that's it, I can't do any more. Thankfully, it was a turning point. And I did say, I don't want to speak to her. I said, if anything untoward happens that she's ill, let me know. Because her epilepsy was out of control as well, so she was having fits, but she wouldn't go and see the neurologist because of her phobias of going out. Yeah. It was so debilitating. She was just locked in a little space because she just couldn't go out because of her anxieties and her vestibular discrimination, etc. But that day was a turning point, and I said, I don't want to speak to her. But of course she'd went off. And I didn't speak to her for 2 weeks. Longest ever period. Shortest now, but it's the longest ever period that I didn't speak to her. She phoned me up one day when I answered it. And she says, Mum, I'm sorry. I said, forget it. I said, what's that word mean? And I was cold. I was really cold. And I was broken and cold. I said, no, it means nothing, Abby. I said, you've got to change. I said, I'm not going to be around forever. We're not going to be around forever. I said, if you don't change, what's it going to be like for the rest of your life? I said, you've got to change. So, again, power of prayer or whatever, I started to visit again. So, first visit was good. Second visit was good. We then got into double figures. The 10th visit was good. Yeah, she'd have an odd blip. That was a turning point. She turned herself round.
Wow.
She started to engage with staff. Although she couldn't really go out a lot, they did take her shopping, but she started to get her life back in order. Yeah. Well, some order, for Abby's order. And those last 2 years were probably the best we'd had in a long time.
So what? The world is a cruel place. You're starting to rebuild this relationship with your daughter, and then you get this dreadful news. What happened?
Right. So I said the last 2 years, I say she started. So she'd been moved to low secure. She was going out and going out a bit more. And so then they were on about getting her into the community. But again, this was a big thing because they were brilliant because they listened to us. They got us involved with places. Sometimes Abby couldn't go and see these places because of, it had to be all on the ground floor. There didn't have to be stairs. There didn't have to be lifts. It got to be on the ground floor. Yeah. It had to be safe. And after looking at various different places and whatever, they found this place in Birmingham, Coleshill. And we went to see it. It was just like a house. It got 4 other residents in. But it was like a house, a proper home sort of thing. Didn't actually meet the manager, but we saw some of the staff and different things. So it was agreed then that this was the place she was going to go. So the December 2018, she was looking forward to the trial leave. She had had an overnight stay there. She'd had a couple of overnight stays there. So on December the 18th, 2018, she was going to stay there on a 3-week trial. This is hard as well, because basically her discharge date, which was January the 7th, was the day she died.
And that was the discharge date?
That was going to be the discharge date from hospital, was January the 7th. However, that was the day she died. So Abby had 3 weeks in this care place. We went up twice. And so the last day we saw it was December the 31st, 2018. Ian had come up. Ashley was away. Zara, even Ava. We took Ava up. Ava Lily, my granddaughter, and John. We had a lovely visit. But Abby was in a panic because her phone had broke. So we're trying to sort out a phone and different things. Anyway, that's by the by. So we're sorting all that out and that. But she was okay. And that was the last time we saw her. I know it sounds daft, but the only regret I did, it wasn't the last photo. We didn't take I'm very much about taking photos, making memories.
Yeah.
Didn't take a photo. But in my mind, I've still got that memory of that day and all the events. So I came home that night and that was fine. Then on January the 3rd, I spoke with Abby every day. She was happy and different things. She says, Mum, I'll be home for next Christmas. It's going to be great. She said, it feels like home now. Yeah. I'll be home with you for next Christmas. It's definitely going to happen. So, but on then January the 3rd, she developed a cold. She was all right. Not different things. And I said, are they looking after you? And she said, yeah. But bear in mind, it was a care home, different thing, not care, but just residential place. So she had a cold and they seemed to be all right. And she says she's liking the carers. So that was January the 3rd. So she went to see, and that would have been a Wednesday. So on the Friday, she went to see the GP nurse because she'd really struggling, and she said, she's got a bit of an ear infection but didn't need anything, so red ear, nothing. So I was having conversations with her, but my last conversation would have been Sunday the 6th of January, and I don't know, that Sunday I knew something was going to happen. I was just on edge. I was sort of, I don't know, myself, I was sort of lacking confidence with work. I was a sister in A&E. I don't know, it's just lots of different things. But that day, I can't explain it to you, Louise, but I was lost. I kind of just knew something wasn't right.
Yeah.
I just knew something wasn't right. And I was talking to an old manager and we were just having a chat. But anyway, so that evening, it was about 5 to 8, Abby had phoned me. That's the last time I actually spoke with her. She was on good form. So she'd been ill with this cold. And she said, I'm feeling better, Mum, feeling better. I said, that's good. I said, but just make sure that, if your temperature goes up or whatever, make sure you have paracetamol, etc. She says, I'm going to go now, though. She says, I want to watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And those were the last words. And I think we said, I loved you. I can't remember. But that was the last thing. Then to get a phone call 4.5 hours later to say your daughter's in hospital. It's a Sunday. I'm sitting in bed. I'd gone to bed. Ashley had gone out because Ashley was back home with us at this time. I'm in bed. I get this phone call just to say, Abby's gone to hospital. No, it was 00:25. I got the first call. And she said, she's gone to hospital. And I said, well, what's wrong? She says, her breathing was difficult. So I said, OK, well, what's happened? She's gone to hospital in the ambulance. The carer's gone with her. I'll give you the number of the carer who can tell you what's going on. So I spoke with the carer at 00:30, and I don't know what it was, but I just knew Abby was not. Abby died at 00:31, but I didn't find out this later. So I'm speaking with this carer at 00:30, and I was asking a question. She said, "Oh, she's in a room." The room was resuscitate. She was being resuscitated, as I found out afterwards. But this poor little carer hadn't got a clue.
Right.
She said, "Oh, she's in a room, Marianne. I've not met the carer." And in a room, I think they'll move her to a ward soon. So then I get a phone call, not from the hospital, at 10:01. By this time, I'd already knew in my heart she'd died. I don't know what it was.
A type of mother's intuition, do you think? Yeah, it's a lot.
I knew she'd died.
Parents say that, don't they?
I knew she'd died. I was praying like hell. Oh. But I knew she'd gone. I knew she'd gone. And I got the phone call, not from the hospital staff, from this poor carer. How they made this poor carer do it. And all she said, "Are you sitting down?" Well, I was sitting on the bed. By this time, John had already been trying to find out where we were going. We'd both had a drink, so we knew we couldn't drive, so we was trying to sort out logistically how we could get up to the hospital. And she said, "Are you sitting down?" I says, "She's dead." And she said, "Yeah, Abby's died." And she was crying. This poor carer was crying.
Yeah.
I said, "Can you go and get me a nurse that was dealing with her, please?" Because it wasn't her place to tell me. Should have been a member of staff at that hospital. The resuscitation team should have told me, or a doctor.
So you were a sister in A&E for years, so you know the protocol, don't you?
I know how I would have dealt with things and how they should be done. Yeah. It wasn't done. Yeah. And I'm not kind of criticising them in any way. However, I'm upset about how I was treated.
Yes.
As a parent, as a mother, knowing how I should have been dealt with.
Yes.
So this nurse then come. I don't know who she was because I can't remember whether she said her name or not. She didn't actually ascertain to see that I was the mother. She said, "Yes, Abby came to us, cardiac arrest, and she's died." I said, "Oh."
And this is over the phone?
Yeah, over the phone. I said, "Well, I'm coming up." "Oh, you're coming up?" I said, "Yes, we're coming up." I said, "You've just told me my daughter has died. I want to be there." "OK." And that's it. So thankfully, I rang a friend, and Ashley had come in this time, so he had told Zara, he was phoning Zara and that. I phoned a friend who actually took us, my good friend Julie. And again, the reception we got when we got to the hospital was not how you should treat bereaved relatives.
Well, you have an insight how to these things work.
And again, I'm not criticising, but that was... Anyway, so we were shown to a room. Somebody will be with you. Poor carer's distraught. I'd never met the carer. And she says, "Oh, Marianne," she says, I've only known Abby a few days. She says, "But I've really fallen in love with her." And she says, "Both of us, we're going to start Slimming World because we're both overweight." Oh. And she says, "We've got things planned." And she says, "I just don't know what to do." And she said, "I don't know what to do now. I don't know." I said, "Well, you probably need to go back to your place." I said, "How are you going?" "I don't know." I said, "Well, ring your manager. Have you got a manager?" "Well, yeah, I can't get hold of her." Anyway, but that's by the by. So I'm kind of comforting her.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't till a person walked past me, and it was a nurse, and she just turned around and she says, "Marianne." And I looked, and it was an agency nurse that actually worked with me in A&E at Warwick. She recognised me. She says, "Marianne, what are you doing here?" So, of course, I told her. She said, "Who's seen you?" I said, "Nobody." I said, "We've been put in a room." And I said, "That's it." So she says, "Well, I'm not having that. I'm going to get you a cup of tea." Cup of tea, it's the answer to everything, but It doesn't do anything but actually a cup of tea in your hand while you something. And then that was it. So she did that. I sorted the care out, and eventually somebody met us and they said, yeah, Abby had a cardiac arrest, died. They showed us where she was, so was taken into, which is an awful place to have a room where you put deceased patients because it's right next to an ambulance bay. So I went into Abby and there's Abby dead. Yeah. So, and then a doctor was going to come and see me, and I'm well aware how A&E works. However, I know from my care that, and Warwick, well, I'm not disputing there, but what I would have done differently. And yes, I know emergencies take priority, but I would have made sure that somebody was assigned to deal with a bereaved relative. But eventually I saw the doctor, and again, I'm not criticising him for whatever, but he just stood there. For me, I expect doctors to actually sit down, introduce themselves, sit down, and he just stood there in the door. And I said, right. And of course I thought, well, is it sepsis because of a cold? Is it this? And he said, oh, she just had the cardiac arrest and died. I says, well, what do you think it is? He says, well, she'll have to have a post-mortem. I said, I'm well aware it's going to have to be a post-mortem because it's a sudden death. But I said, have you got any? Was it pulmonary embolism? Do you think it was sepsis? He says, well, I don't know. He said, we did all the, because she came in resuscitation, she came in with difficulty in breathing. They tried nebulizers. We did all the irreversible causes, etc. But, after an hour and a half, it was of no...
It doesn't make sense, does it? Because although she was getting over a cold and you'd had this conversation with her, she said she was starting to feel better and she was looking forward to watching a television programme. To go from that to being dead within a few
4.5
hours, how do you come to terms with that?
I don't know, because she hadn't been discharged into community, so she still actually died as if she was in hospital. And again, her epilepsy wasn't well controlled because she took her medication, but she wouldn't go for, reviews and things like that. So there was going to be an inquest, and yes, Abby had the post-mortem 3 days after she died, and then I was in great conversation with the coroner's assistant who, was brilliant every step of the way, but we had to wait 11 months for an inquest. Well, initially it was 7 months. However, because they have to get all the reports from the paramedics, the hospital, the care home, etc., it took 11 months.
Right.
So the pathologist report was inconclusive, really. Natural causes. Nobody, they died, but, natural causes, but inconclusive sort of thing. So,
but is it natural to die of a cardiac arrest at such a young age?
Well, it's not. But again, some people, sudden adult death syndrome does happen, that they just have a cardiac arrest and can die. But St Andrews wasn't happy because what they did was they actually then assumed that I think she'd actually done an overdose because she'd got high levels of clozapine and, I can't think of the other drug now anyway, but she'd got venlafaxine. Was it venlafaxine and clozapine? High levels of clozapine and venlafaxine in her bloodstream. So, it's probably easier to say, oh, well, she probably took an overdose of those or just misdiagnosed or overdose or whatever.
Yeah.
However, St Andrews wasn't happy with that, and they said no, because on post-mortem, the levels will rise of these drugs. So that is not a definitive cause of death. So that's why we had to wait 11 months.
You're sat here today in a podcast talking about it. How did you get to this place? What helps you to navigate your grief journey?
Talking to people like yourself that has gone through a similar, because we are in the club that nobody wants to be in.
Yeah.
And unless you've actually lost a child, whether it's a miscarriage, doesn't matter what age, a miscarriage, stillbirth, young child with terminal illness, child with whatever, an adult child, nobody will understand that grief the way they do. And everybody's grief is individual for them. But to walk, it's called the ugly shoes. But to walk, but yourself has helped me. I am a great believer in seeking help as well, and I have had counselling and different things. But singing.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions I know you wanted to ask me.
I'm going to ask you about the choir, yes.
Abby died January 2019. And it was around about September 2019. I go to Heathcote Parish Church. I do believe I am a Christian. I might not always be a good Christian because, yes, But however, I have got a belief. And this one Sunday, this couple and a few people came, and they were from the Big Sing Choir. And the Big Sing Choir originated in Essex, in London. And these two marvellous people, Gemma and Howard Francis, are the directors of the Big Sing. And they came to our church and they said they wanted to start a community choir. So September 29, Big Sing Choir started at Heathcote Parish Church. And that's been my saving grace, as well as my granddaughter's my saving grace as well. But it has helped me so much, because sometimes you can't speak your emotions, but you can sing them.
Yeah. I think there's a massive healing power in singing, dancing, music.
It's helped my mental health tremendously.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know it's helped other people with their mental health, and it's just good. It really is, and it's helped me.
And you've got a big gig coming up soon with somebody very famous. Would you like to tell us about that?
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, thankfully, our director, Howard Francis, he's in the know, isn't he? Bless him. And on March the 14th, if anybody's a fan of the Lighthouse family, we, the Big Sing, are performing with Tundi from the Lighthouse. And I absolutely love the Lighthouse family.
I do.
I am blown away that I'm actually going to see him in Birmingham on the Thursday, and I'm actually being able to perform with him on the Saturday.
That is amazing. So it's given you this sort of new lease of life, hasn't
totally.
it? And I think, Abby will be so proud of you.
Well, Abby used to say you can't sing, Mum, but I'm telling you, Abby, I can sing.
I know you can sing, and I've seen the clips on Facebook of you singing. It's almost saved you, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It did. It saved me. I'm blessed with good friends. I'm blessed with people in my life. But yeah, singing did save me.
Now, I did know your story, but I didn't know exactly what you went through. I still don't. Nobody's going to know. Nobody is going to know.
You can't put this all into one podcast.
But I got more today than I was expecting. I didn't realise how much pain and hurt and suffering you and your family went through.
We went through physical and mental fights. It was just... It was awful. As I said, if the police were called, it wasn't... I mean, I'll never forget the first time she went, it was a police with the dog. It was the dogs. Yeah.
And I didn't know you then. I know you now after you losing Abby, and I know the person you are. And I just think you are absolutely incredible, Marianne. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to come here and share your story today, because you're keeping Abby's memory alive. And, for parents who are listening, excuse me, it's not often I cry in a podcast, but for parents who are listening, who may be fighting similar battles or grieving for their own child, what words of wisdom could you share to maybe help them loosen their grief in some way?
There's just a 4-letter word, hope. You just hope. You keep on hoping that one day that they'll be listened to. You hope that one day that they find their right path to go on. And you just hope. And I say that to people, and in the job I did in A&E, I remember saying that to one father who was struggling. Well, I've said it to many. I said to one father, I said, he didn't want to speak to me. And it doesn't matter, I'm not naming anybody, but he didn't want to speak, he didn't want to be there. And eventually he did talk to me, and I actually did what I said I was going to do. I was going to get the help for the daughter that day, and I did. And he just looked at me, says, how do we get through this? And I talked with him, and again, I was a bit unprofessional because basically I actually did briefly tell him a bit about my background.
Yeah.
He says, how do you manage? How do you do this job? And I says, hope. I think hope is...
Yeah.
Hope.
Hope is the belief that at some point in the future, life will get better.
Yeah.
And that's all we need, isn't it? We need to know that there is hope.
And I never say, why should it have happened to me? And I think, well, it happened to me for a reason. Things do happen for a reason. And through everything we've gone through, I would still say I'm a better person. Would I particularly want to be in this position? Probably not.
We don't choose to be here, do we?
No.
But you've helped me as well. We help each other.
Ditto.
But would you like to share what is your favourite memory of Abby?
Oh, she was a lovely little blonde little girl bouncing around, not caring the world. And it was there, but that seems a lifetime ago, because that's when she was carefree, and Abby's at peace.
Yeah.
Abby's flying high on whatever you want to believe universe we're in.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I take comfort by knowing she's safe.
Yeah.
She was lucky. There were a lot of people, they loved her. They did love her.
Yeah. She was loved.
She was loved.
Yeah.
She was loved.
And I know you have a faith. Was your faith ever shaken at any point? You're always...
No.
Oh, that's good to hear.
No. As I said, I am a Christian, but not always a good one. Yeah. I can say the odd swear word now and again, so yeah. But, you know, in the right place. However, do you know what? My last words when I left Abbey were, you're with the Lord now, you're safe.
Yes.
And it's not about kind of preaching Christianity or anything. This is my belief, nobody else's.
I love that, Marianne. I love that you have that belief and that faith. And I also have a belief.
I've never been angry with God either.
No. I can understand why people
We went
do.
through the hell. We went through hell.
Yeah.
And it was hell.
And it was years and years
of hell.
years.
But now we're not.
Yeah.
We're at peace.
That's good to hear. And I believe that when we make peace, it sends them peace too. Now, I know you have your faith and you're a Christian. Do you believe our loved ones can give us signs?
Yes.
I'd love you to share that story that you told me about. Do you know the one I mean?
There's many.
The microphone.
Oh my God, yes.
Could you share that? Because that gives me tingles.
Yeah, we all believe in feathers. Robins are very significant in my life. However, the one that Louise is referring to was I have private singing lessons. And the tutor I have is very spiritual as well. And I was going for a singing lesson on a Wednesday. But the Tuesday before the Wednesday, a bit like the Sunday before Abby died, I was very kind of in a place, I don't know, my mind's all over the place. I can't think what song to sing. I'm really not sure I'm going to do this, all this lot. So anyway, oh dear. Yeah, so I even said to Ashley, my son, he said, Mother, it's fine, Sarah. But anyway, I had a conversation with Sarah. I said, I really don't know what I'm going to sing. So anyway, I get this kind of message back from Sarah. She said, it's fine. She says, I've sort of had this message from Abby. I'd say people probably think we're mad, but anyway. But she said, she's given me these 4 songs. Well, Sarah didn't know these songs were on my to-do list. Now, there's a song that's very significant with Abby, and it's called Fields of Gold. Now, Abby lost a friend some years prior to her dying, Sarah, at the age of 21. Sudden adult death syndrome. She just died. And Sarah had Fields of Gold played at her funeral. And Abby hated so The funeral was September the 11th, prior to Abby going into hospital on a section. For years, Abby hated the song Fields of Gold. Literally hated it. Hated it. And I said to her one day, I said, stop hating it, listen to it how Sarah listened to it. Start to love that song and start seeing it in a different light. And she did. And she said to me, Mum, I can listen to that song now. And all that lot. So Sarah, the tutor, did put 4 songs. The first one was Fields of Gold. Second one was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Both significant. So I was having a conversation with Sarah and she says, Fields of Gold, it is them. So I went. I'm driving over to Sarah's, thinking I'm not going to be able to sing this song, can't sing this song, all this lot, putting all the negatives in. Well, then again, to cut a long story short, I did sing this song. However, there was one line on the second verse that Abby, or somebody, wasn't letting me sing. Anyway, in the end, I got very cross and I was saying, Abby, will you do one now? Because I need to sing this song. Anyway, I did sing this song. So I travelled home and I actually spoke to Abby's friend's sister and said, I've done this song, do you mind if I post it? It's going to go on Facebook. And I said what it was. She said, oh no. I said it's, and also I said, Sarah's going to put, she wants to put like a video, because there's a musical interlude. She said she wants to put pictures of Abby and can I put one of Sarah? So in between Fields of Gold, there's this little bit of music and it's got the pictures of Abby and Sarah. So this song was done in memory for them. And when Sarah, my tutor, had actually, she says, I said, thank you so much for today. She said, this has been the hardest one to actually put together, the recording. And she said, if you look at the recording, if you look at the mic, see what you can see. Well, I couldn't see it. So anyway, she showed it me again. And there's a bit of a video clip, and in the mic, there's a reflection as I'm singing a rainbow. Now, there was no light that could have created this rainbow. There was no crystals hanging down that would have given a rainbow reflection.
No.
But there was a rainbow here that you saw, Louise, with your own eyes.
I saw it with my own eyes. It's on Facebook. There is a rainbow on the microphone.
So for
100%.
me, that was just testimony that, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you've had many signs, but I just thought that was really special. So thank you for sharing that with us today. Abby's still around you, definitely. And if you could give Abby a message now, what would you like to say?
I love you, and I just hope you're flying high with the angels. And don't annoy Patrick Swayze too much, because she loved Patrick Swayze.
Didn't we all?
Oh, didn't we just?
Oh, thank you so much. As we come to the end of today's episode, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for trusting me with Abby's story. I know how much courage it takes to speak about your child, your journey and your grief so openly. And your love for Abby is so clear. And it lives on in every word you've shared today. Abby mattered. Her life mattered, her struggles mattered, and most importantly, she mattered. And through this conversation, her voice is still being heard and her story is continuing to make a difference. What we've heard today is not just a story about loss. It's a story of a mother who never stopped fighting, who never stopped loving, and never stopped showing up for her child, even when the systems around her failed. It's a reminder of how important it is to listen to our most vulnerable, to believe them and to protect them before it's too late. If this episode has brought up emotions for you, please know that you're not alone in that. Grief has a way of touching parts of us we didn't even know were hurting, so be gentle with yourself. Marianne, Thank you for keeping Abby's memory alive in such a powerful way. Your strength, your honesty, and your compassion will stay with so many people who listen to this. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being here. Thank you for holding space for these stories and for choosing to listen with an open heart. If this episode has touched you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need it and help Abby's story reach even further. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Gift for Grief. If you found it comforting, please consider subscribing to my podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Please also leave a review because it helps others to find the show. Together we can help each other become more grief literate. To learn more about my personal journey and my 2 books on grief, visit www.louisebates.co.uk. The music on this podcast was written and recorded by my son Matthew Bates and can be found on his 2 albums, Fight Back and Kaleidoscope. And finally, if you're struggling with grief or concerned about your mental health, please reach out to your doctor. You don't have to go through this alone. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and thank you for listening.